Let's get into it. This is a movie that I saw today. Today, went to the movies to see something new. Snow White was obviously the biggest hit that was released today, which is getting kind of mixed reviews from people. But I decided to go see the movie that I was most curious about, which was I had seen a trailer for a movie called Wise Guys a long time ago. And it looked like it was a mix between Goodfellas, The Godfather, and more importantly, it starred Robert De Niro, right? Which always seems to kind of garner attention. So, especially after the release of The Irishman, which starred Al Pacino and Robert De Niro and Joe Pesci, right? It seemed interesting. Hey, it seems like we're having another incarnation of this, dare I say, genre of mobster movie coming out. And in this movie, Robert De Niro, it stars Robert De Niro playing Frank Costello, which is based on a true story, and also stars Robert De Niro. Yeah, you heard that right. Robert De Niro in a dual role playing two different characters. And this movie, I'm here to tell you that this movie, if it were not for the popcorn, if it was not for the concessions that I had at Alamo Movie Theater, this movie would have been slightly unbearable to sit through. It is a long haul of watching this true story dramatized through even self-proclaimed through the same people who made hits like The Godfather. It literally says on the poster, from the hit makers of Goodfellas. Not The Godfather, Goodfellas. And it just does not resonate. It is a movie that struggles to garner interest in the very beginning and uses the same old trite mobster tale that left me feeling that we've seen this story too many times before. One, There are so many things that are right with this movie, but it does not coalesce in a way that makes it entertaining to watch. And what I mean by that is that the cinematography is beautiful. The visuals are amazing, right? What they do to make a period piece, because this movie takes place within the 1940s, 1950s of New York, when the mobster scene was big, and it was corruption was rampant and all this kind of stuff. It does such a good job dramatizing that era that it feels like they focused so much on that they forgot to actually write a compelling story with characters that you want to care about. And on top of that, they make choices in this movie that don't make a lot of sense, right? And I don't want to bash on a movie. I don't want to bash on the creation of a movie. Every single time somebody creates something, it's a great thing, right? It's something to feed off of, to comment on, blah, blah, blah. But the choice of having Robert De Niro do a dual role in this movie is very confusing to the viewer. It took me 10 minutes to figure out, is that Robert De Niro playing the antagonist as well as the protagonist? Right? It was hard enough to kind of get past the idea of watching a geriatric Godfather. But then to have to wrap your mind around that Robert De Niro is playing both roles. Robert De Niro is an actor that is very, very definitively Robert De Niro. Right? Robert De Niro has been using the same head movement for 5 decades to play characters that are less like the characters themselves and more just like Robert De Niro in different eras. So the idea of him trying to play a character that's so disparate from his other character he's playing, you needed to bring to that role something that was so distinctive that it would set everybody apart, right? The way that Eddie Murphy, did the Nutty Professor, right? Like, but unfortunately, it falls on its face because Robert De Niro is so definitively Robert De Niro. There's not enough makeup in the world or CGI in the world to make the second character, which is Vito. What is his name? Vito Genense. Vito, distinct from Frank Costello in this movie. There is more character separation from Tyler Perry and Medea than there is from Frank and Vito in this movie. It is like watching two people play the same part with a little bit of a twist and thinking it's different. It's very confusing, right? Even in the very, very beginning when they reveal the characters, I'm like, is that Robert De Niro? And I went into this movie with no understanding that he was doing that. And it took me about 20 minutes to go, why? Like, I couldn't understand what the process was. So I looked it up after I went to go see the movie. I looked it up. I said, well, I got to know, right? I got to know why this was the choice. And it turns out it was just because they wanted to. There was no distinct reason to. This movie would have benefited so much more had they actually let a different actor play the other character. It's hard enough. Again, I said it's the geriatric Godfather, right? It starts off so similarly. And there's no doubt that probably this story in real life influenced The Godfather, blah, blah, blah. But it starts off so similar. And when you have you have Robert De Niro, who's in Godfather 2, right? In this movie, you can't help but make comparisons to the old Godfather while watching this. And it starts off so similarly, it's hard enough to get past that. And then they introduce you to Robert De Niro and playing both characters who are supposed to be probably around their 50s, 40s, 50s. And there's not enough makeup in the world to make these characters believable. That they should have just casted a different person. They should have casted two different people entirely. It's unclear whether this movie, and apparently this movie, according to like Wikipedia and the stuff that I've read, this movie had a hard time getting made. And maybe it did need Robert De Niro to pull people to the theater, but it just wasn't compelling. It was long. It was drawn out. It was in dire need of an editor. There are moments where they're just riding in the car to a party towards the concluding act of the movie, where you're like, how much longer can this movie go? It was like watching someone age in real time. And there's not enough investment in the characters because you've already been, I don't want to say assaulted by the visual travesty that's going on when you have an 81-year-old man trying to play a 50-year-old man. It's just not believable. But it suspends your disbelief, right? There is no suspension of disbelief here and believing that he's the character. So then you're basically brought up with a story that's not really that compelling, right? That's hard to believe. And also it's the same trite story that's been overplayed in many, many stories before, like the ones that they pimp in the trailer right there. Goodfellas, Irishman. That you know what the end of this thing looks like before it even concludes. It's not getting very good reviews. It is a movie that I would hope that would take a different kind of tact. You'd hope that there are three actors that are known for these movies right now, and that's Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci, right? And it's just very confusing to me why they would make this movie because it seems like it just treads familiar territory over and over again. Again, going back to the dual role, could they not afford Joe Pesci? That was a legitimate question, right? It seems like Robert De Niro was playing in his role of the character Vito, was playing a Joe Pesci-like character. Why didn't they go in that direction? That confuses me. They said Robert De Niro wanted to do it as a change of pace. Turns out this was the wrong thing to do. It's not a very good movie, right? It keeps on going. It doesn't hold your attention. It's very, very slow, and unfortunately, it's not going to break the upper tier of mobster movies in a theater anytime soon. The movie also kind of feels like I just finished watching Anora, right? And I only bring this up because Anora, Conan made the joke. Anora says like the F-bomb like 473 times, right? This movie, right? You think everybody it's just too much. It's too much Italian mobster stereotype thrown in your face. That even if it was accurate to the era, it just seems like it's just overdone. It seems like somebody made a caricature and they tried to make a lukewarm Godfather. That's what it feels like to me. It was not an enjoyable thing to watch. It was not an enjoyable thing to take in. It wasn't at all interesting. You didn't have time to invest in characters. It just seemed cheap, and maybe that's why no one was in the theater with me when I watched this show, because maybe people already kind of got the memo that this movie wasn't going to be good. It lacked charm, right? It lacked a likable character in this movie, and it suspended your disbelief too much. I go back to The Godfather because The Godfather, obviously one of the best movies of all time, but there is it draws you in because of some of the choices they made, right? Vito Corleone, at the time The Godfather starts in that plot, he's an older mob boss, right? That his sons are slowly taking over the business, learning the business, but they're expressing deference to the Godfather, to Vito Corleone, right? And eventually when Vito finds that his time is starting to kind of go down, or he wants out, blah, 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 he's kind of leaving the operation to Tom Hagen, to Sonny, right? It's believable, right? These guys, they look so old in these things. Not only is it hard to believe that they have working relationships with people who find them, attractive, blah, blah, blah. It's so unbelievable. But they look so old in the movie that, for them to be pushing a crime syndicate is so unbelievable. The only thing they should be pushing is a walker in this movie. They are so old looking that it's hard to even fathom that this is believable. So they don't really do justice to whatever this true story is. I mean, obviously it's far past the time. And also it doesn't really resonate in a time where if you're going to do a movie like this, I think you have to do a better job making it distinct, right? And maybe they're trying to be accurate to the true story. They're trying to be accurate to the material, but you got to make it distinct. You have to make it resonate. You have to have something different about it. And it just felt like it was so by the numbers, a mob movie that we've seen. So don't waste your time on Alto Knights. I say this probably as the strongest recommendation I've had in my podcast before. Don't waste your time with this movie. Watch Goodfellas. Watch The Godfather. Watch something that's very, very smart and intelligently made. And watch The Irishman, right? Same people, right? This is Bruckheimer, right? Watch that. Save your time. Unless you just really like movie theater concessions and you just like being in the theater and you have nothing else to see, maybe you have a movie pass, maybe something like that. Don't waste your time with this movie. This movie is something that's going to be made and forgotten. I doubt that we're going to be talking about this movie for a long time. There is a way. I just recently saw Oppenheimer again for the third time, and that movie does such a good job taking historical nonfiction about a character and making you invested in the character. And obviously Christopher Nolan has a very, very different idea of what compels a viewer, and he has a very different filmmaking style. But there's something about that, like it left me leaving the theater going, why was Oppenheimer so interesting and this true story wasn't? Why was something directed by Nolan so good and then this movie directed by Barry Levinson, why wasn't it as compelling? And I think it just has to do with character development, right? That there's too many things going against this film. Its visuals, the odd way that it was exposition heavy throughout the entire thing. You'll find that if you watch this movie, Robert De Niro like VOs most of the movie in this kind of interview-esque style. It made me think throughout the whole movie going, is there going to be some reveal that people are doing an interview about him, that it's a documentary? No, he's just breaking the fourth wall the whole time. There's no reason for it. Like, it just doesn't pay off the way you want it to pay off. So don't go see this movie. It's not worth it. It's not a good movie. It's a mobster movie by the numbers. And honestly, I couldn't recommend it against it enough. So that is Alto Knights. It just didn't do it for me. Let me put it that way. So it's not as rough. It didn't do it for me the way that other films did. I think there's other films that do it better. I think there are other films that are more willing to develop the character to make you feel a level of investment as opposed to Alto Knights did. So that's my 2 cents on that film. Again, this is Alto Knights starring Robert De Niro and Robert De Niro because I'm assuming they just wanted to keep the payroll down. I don't know why they would even, the production, sorry, I keep going back. I will wrap up the show quickly, but the production value of doing something like that, of filming a movie with both characters playing the same role, of doing a nutty professor, right? Kind of filming, doing a Tyler Perry-esque kind of thing. It's difficult to do. Why would you take that on? Right? We already saw, is it because it's different from all the other mobster movies that we've seen? We've seen Robert De Niro versus Al Pacino in Heat. We've seen Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, and Joe Pesci in The Irishman, right? We've seen Joe Pesci and Robert De Niro in Goodfellas, right? Robert De Niro versus Robert De Niro. Like, is there no other actor that could have taken that role to play it more believably? It just seems it's old, it's trite. It just didn't do it for me. So Alto Knights not getting the thumbs up from the Powell Not Found podcast, getting the thumbs down for this particular one. So go try to do something else with your time, then see this movie. Again,